My brother promised me the world, but pulled me into a financial abyss the size of the Grand Canyon. He thought I'd just accept his failure, but one day he realized I don't play by his rules. What started as a family business ended in war, ready to find out who stayed afloat. My name is Jake. I'm 29 years old, and I've always prided myself on being able to spot a scam. You know, the kind of guy who double-checks that the lights are off before leaving the house and doesn't believe in free lunches. But my younger brother Ethan, 27, managed to turn me from a cautious skeptic into the perfect target for his big ideas. He barged into my house on a Friday night with so much enthusiasm, I thought he'd won the lottery. "Jake, this is your chance, our chance. We can start our own business and finally break free from this boring routine." His voice was so full of confidence that my internal warning bells started ringing. He laid out a folder full of documents in front of me, as if he were about to defend a PhD dissertation. His idea: selling eco-friendly gadgets. These things, he claimed, were revolutionary. They supposedly reduced carbon footprints, saved the planet, and looked so futuristic they might as well have a Martian logo slapped on them. I looked at him and asked, "Ethan, where did you get this? Do you even know how the market works?" He smiled like he was about to reveal the secret formula to happiness. "Of course. I consulted friends, read studies, analyzed demand. Listen, now is the perfect time for this business. People want to go green. All we need is some startup capital, and who better than my smart, caring older brother to invest in this idea?" I couldn't help but notice how he emphasized smart and caring, as if they were the password to my wallet. Ethan had always been good at tugging on heartstrings. Naturally, I had doubts. Knowing his tendency to get overly excited about things that fizzled out as quickly as a sparkler on New Year's Eve, I asked a few tough questions. "What if it doesn't work? Do you understand the risk?" Ethan looked at me as though I'd just suggested we skip Christmas presents. "Jake, risk is part of success. Trust me, we're going to make a fortune. And if you don't invest, I'll find someone else. But don't be upset when I get rich and you're stuck at your boring job." That last comment got to me. Nobody wants to be the one who missed out on the opportunity of a lifetime, especially when it's your younger brother doing the persuading. The charts looked convincing. The list of potential clients seemed impressive. And damn it, he looked so sure of himself that I started to wonder if he really knew what he was doing. I invested. My entire emergency fund, which I'd been saving for starting my own business, or maybe buying something big, like a car. And the moment I hit send on the bank transfer, I felt it. My life had just changed. Though I didn't yet know in what way. At first, everything looked pretty impressive. Ethan rented a small office downtown. You know, one of those trendy places with brick walls and fake plants, like an Instagram showroom. He hired a small team of employees, but when I asked who they were, it turned out they were his friends. One was his basketball buddy, another was some college acquaintance who supposedly knew marketing. Yep, a squad of friends and connections sounded like the beginning of a tragedy, but I kept quiet for the moment. Ethan hit the ground running. The first batch of gadgets was packed, advertising campaigns were launched, and he even shot a video explaining how his gadgets changed the world. I watched it and thought, "Ethan, if anyone can sell a dream, it's you." But the dream soon started to crumble. A couple of weeks later, I got my first worrying call from Ethan. "Hey Jake, there's a slight hiccup. Our suppliers are delaying the second shipment, but don't worry, it'll be fine." His voice sounded as confident as ever, but by this point, I was beginning to realize that his "it'll be fine" was a universal response to any catastrophic scenario. Then the customer reviews started rolling in. One person wrote that their device broke after 3 days. Another said the buttons were sticking. A third returned the box entirely because, apparently, it wouldn't even open. I called Ethan. "Ethan, did you even check these gadgets before shipping them?" He answered so calmly that I nearly dropped the phone. "Jake, these are just early hiccups. Every business has them. You've got to trust me." Trust him? Seriously? I started feeling like I'd signed up for a reality show where the goal was to survive a financial apocalypse. A couple of weeks later, I decided to drop by the office unannounced. You know, just a quick inspection. And that's when my internal what the fuck moment began. The scene was so bad it could have been a case study in how not to run a business. The employees were chatting and sipping coffee. One guy was glued to his phone, which I later discovered was because he was playing some game. And in the corner, like a pile of shame, sat stacks of unsold gadgets gathering dust. I found Ethan at his desk, surrounded by papers that, as far as I could tell, were just blank spreadsheets printed out for appearances. "Ethan, do you even understand what you're doing?" I asked, barely keeping my anger in check. "We're losing money. Customers are complaining, employees are slacking off, and suppliers are already delaying shipments. This is a disaster." He just shrugged, as if I'd complained about my coffee being too hot. "Jake, you're overreacting. Everything's under control." Under control? If everything were under control, I wouldn't be standing in this circus trying to figure out how we were even staying afloat. By now, I started questioning where all the money had gone. Ethan was burning through it on office rent, overpriced ads no one watched, and even new equipment we didn't need. I could feel my savings vanishing into thin air. Each day got worse. But instead of owning up to his mistakes, Ethan kept pretending everything was fine, and I started realizing we were teetering on the edge of a cliff. It was just a matter of who would fall first. 1 month. That's all it took for our mega business, which Ethan sold me as a ticket to a new life, to turn into a crumbling fortress with gaping holes where everything was falling apart. Remember how he'd assured me everything was under control? Well, by now, even the circumstances had lost control of the situation. It all started with the suppliers. One after another, they began sending termination notices. The reasons? Unfulfilled commitments, delayed payments, and my personal favorite, a lack of professionalism. Let's just say that the eco-gadget industry doesn't have much patience for people who think "we'll figure it out as we go" is a legitimate business strategy. Then came the customers. I never thought gadgets could infuriate people to the point that they'd return them with angry notes. One guy literally left a message on the box that read, "Refund me or I'm throwing this back through your window." It would have been funny if I weren't sitting there trying to figure out how to recoup even 10% of my investment. And then they arrived. The debt collectors. Yep, those guys in suits who look like they're either going to beat the money out of you or sign a deal for your soul. They stood in the office demanding to see the owner. Want to guess what surprise was waiting for me? Turns out Ethan, the genius entrepreneur, had taken out a loan. Yes, a loan. To bridge the cash flow gap. Naturally, he hadn't told me. Why bother mentioning to your business partner and investor that you've sunk the company into debt? I stormed out of the office like a missile and was banging on Ethan's door within half an hour. He didn't answer right away, probably hearing my knocks and deciding it was easier to pretend he wasn't home. But I had other plans. When the door finally opened, the person standing before me barely resembled my brother. His shirt looked like he'd been sleeping in it for a week, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hair was a mess. He looked like the poster child for How to Ruin Your Life in 30 Days. "Ethan, where's the money?" I barely kept myself from shouting loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. He sighed, rubbed his face, and pulled out some pre-rehearsed excuse. "Jake, I tried. I really tried. But the market turned out to be tougher than I expected." "Tougher than you expected?" My hand instinctively went to my temples as my head began to throb. "You took out a loan. You burned through all the money, and now you're telling me this isn't your fault?" "It's the circumstances," he muttered, looking up at me with those sad eyes. My patience snapped. "Ethan, your circumstances are nothing but your total irresponsibility." I stepped closer so he could feel how serious I was. "You dragged me into this, you wasted my money, you signed off on a damn loan without telling me. And now what? You think I'm just going to sit here and watch you ruin everything?" He tried to respond, but I was done listening. The situation was crystal clear. He'd lost. "If you can't handle this, I'm taking over," I said coldly, like a judge delivering a verdict. Ethan tried to fight back. "Jake, I can still fix this. Just give me a little more time." His voice was tired and desperate, but I wasn't buying it. "No, Ethan, your time is up. Either I take control or this business dies today." After that, he just slumped his shoulders, let out a heavy sigh, and mumbled, "Fine. Do whatever you want." In that moment, I realized I was the only one left on a sinking ship. Ethan had given up, and I was the only one who could save what little remained. Once I understood that the wreckage of this business now rested entirely on my shoulders, I had to put my anger aside and start working. There was no time to figure out why things had gone so disastrously wrong. There was only one rule. If we're going down with music and minimal losses. The first step was tackling the paperwork. The financial reports looked like they'd been written by someone who couldn't even turn on a calculator. The contracts were full of holes, and the customer return requests were piling up like garbage in a back alley. It was chaos, practically screaming, "Welcome to hell, Jake. Enjoy your stay." But I decided I wasn't giving up. I started by calling the suppliers. If you think those were pleasant conversations, you clearly don't understand the joy of convincing people who are ready to hang up on you. One supplier said, "We don't work with people like you anymore." To which I replied, "You've never worked with someone like me. Give me a chance." And you know what? It worked. I negotiated new terms that didn't require upfront payments. Small victory. Next, the customers. Oh, the customers. This was a special kind of pain. People who'd written that they'd lost faith in humanity because of our gadgets were now listening as I promised to make things right. "We'll send you a new improved version," I assured them, though I had no idea what that even meant. But they liked it. The important thing was restoring trust. And then there were the employees. No, not employees, but that band of slackers who seemed to have been hired solely to waste time and money. One of them, seeing me walk into the office, literally asked, "Oh, are we doing something today?" "Yes, dude, we're doing your termination papers." A week later, the company was down to just me, one actual programmer who still believed in the project, and a mountain of work. Ethan, meanwhile, had disappeared. First, he skipped a few meetings, then he stopped answering calls. And one fine day, I got a message from him. "Jake, do whatever you want. I'm done." Perfect. Just what I wanted to hear from the guy who created this disaster. I forgot about him for the next 6 months. During that time, I managed to get things back on track. Supply chains stabilized, customers started returning, and we even paid off most of the debts. And the best part? The company finally started turning a profit. Yes, I did that. Alone. But then came the surprise. Turns out, Ethan's share in the company was now legally mine. Why? Because his debts were tied to the business, and the only way to pay them off was to strip him of his ownership. And honestly, I didn't feel bad about it. It was the logical outcome. But Ethan didn't see it that way. One evening, he barged into my house. He looked slightly better than the last time I saw him, but he still resembled someone who just learned his life was over. Well, in a way, it was. "You took everything," he shouted before I could even say a word. "You left me with nothing." I looked at him with an expression that said, "Seriously? You're here to complain?" "Ethan, you left us with nothing when you started this. I just saved what I could," I replied calmly. He stood there, struggling to find words, but it was clear he had no argument left. He turned around and left, slamming the door behind him. And that was the end of our relationship. This experience taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Even the people closest to you can let you down, especially when they come to you with perfect opportunities. Since then, I've only trusted myself. And the company? It survived. And honestly, I'm prouder of that than anything else in my life.